This video will function as a review for the original release of Destroy All Humans for the PlayStation 2, a review for the remake that just came out recently, and like my Resident Evil 3 video a few months ago, a comparison between the two highlighting what each does better than the other and the quality of life implementations in the remake. Destroy All Humans was originally released in 2005. For a lack of a more eloquent way of describing the game, it's a GTA clone with a twist. A very fun twist that makes it one of my favorite series of the PlayStation 2, but at the end of the day, it still has the formula. Your sandbox is filled with citizens to kill with your arsenal of weapons, ammo is scattered around the world, and the more you kill, the higher your notoriety. And there are side mission challenges when you aren't fucking around in the sandbox or playing main story missions. Our villainous protagonist is Cryptosporidium 137 of the Furon Empire. The Furons are a race of aliens that have achieved immortality through cloning, but due to their excessive use of it, their genetic code has degraded, leading to unpredictable issues. Since they don't have genitalia, they have no way to reproduce naturally, but eons ago they stopped by Earth and fucked around with primitive humans, so now the people walking the Earth today have pure, untainted Furon genetic code within their DNA. Crypto-136 was originally sent to Earth to get this Furon code, but has since been captured by the humans, so it's up to 137 to save him, and of course, going into this video, I replayed the original, so when I went to play the remake, I could take notes of every slight difference that I noticed. Then I took these notes and organized them into 3 groups: good quality of life improvements, iffy changes, and lastly, bad changes. Change in and of itself is of course not a good or bad thing inherently, so I'm going to try to be as clear as possible when explaining why I think a change does or does not work. Like I said earlier, the gameplay very much follows the PS2 era GTA formula, with the twist of playing an alien with a high-tech arsenal. You have 4 weapons in this game: the Zapomanic that shoots arcs of lightning that you can chain to multiple people surrounding your target. The Disintegration Ray shoots balls of fire at your enemies. In the remake, they made it so you can shoot people one less time than killing them, and it will just set them on fire, leaving their bodies behind instead of just vaporizing them like it does in the original. The Ion Detonator shoots small grenades that you can explode by pressing the fire button again. The distance you shoot the grenade is based on how long you charge the gun, and in the remake they give you a range indicator. The final weapon is the Anal Probe, that is a charge weapon that shoots a green tendril that makes people shit themselves and then their head explodes so you can collect their brains. This is the only weapon that got reworked for the remake. Instead of being a charge shot, it now shoots a tendril that locks onto an enemy and drains their health. Once their health reaches 0, their head will explode just like in the original, which allows you to collect their brain. I think I prefer the remake version, since the original requires you to fully charge it to actually harvest brains, and if you are only slightly under the full charge, it would basically do nothing. It also takes multiple fully charged shots against majestic agents in order to harvest their brains, so it feels like you're down a weapon against the highest ranked enemies, and there is no way to upgrade the gun to make it better. Now in the remake you have 6 upgrades, and once the gun is fully upgraded, it becomes incredibly overpowered to the point where it basically does all the work for you, so you could possibly see that as a negative. The only improvement I'd like for this gun is with the remake's newly implemented aim and lock-on feature. They should make it so the lock-on when using the Anal Probe only targets humans, because it functions like it does with the other 3 weapons, and sometimes in cluttered, tense situations it'll lock on to cars behind humans and you don't realize it until you waste the shot and it will do nothing. Even though you only have 4 weapons in this game, it's still really annoying to cycle through them, since in the original all you can do is just hit the weapon swap button and cycle through them, but in the remake they added a weapon wheel. To get ammo for the Disintegration Ray and the Ion Detonator, you need to pick up ammo drops scattered throughout the world. In the remake, they sadly did away with this to introduce Transmog, which was a mechanic they introduced in Destroy All Humans 2. You can transmute random items in the world to turn them into ammo, and this is the biggest bad change in my opinion. This is the only way to get ammo in the remake, outside of a few boss fights where ammo is just laying around in a few corners because I guess they realized it was a bad idea when limited to small arenas. But there is still a decent amount of areas you can run into where there is nothing to transmog for ammo, so I just had to run around until I found something, or got the final telekinesis upgrade that allows you to transmog cars. The big issue I have with it is that it takes too long to convert things into ammo, even when it's upgraded. You can only transmog one thing at a time, and worst of all, what you get is seemingly random. And no matter the situation, I always found myself getting the opposite ammo ammo of what I needed. Out of disintegration ray, here's some ion ammo. Need some ion ammo, here's some disintegration ray. Hopefully they'll update the drop rates in a patch, or if what's dropped is based on what you transmog, I either missed this or the game doesn't tell you this at all. Psychic abilities are your other option to use when messing around in the sandbox. Telekinesis allows you to pick up humans and objects in the world and fling them around. With upgrades, you can pick up heavier things like cars, tanks, and robots. The remake made telekinesis so much more fluid compared to the original, which, while it was fun to use, can feel slow and stiff. The only issue with the remake is that it doesn't explain how you can pick up enemies without throwing them. For a while, I thought they just removed it from the game because of this. I don't know why they wouldn't include this information in the tutorial prompt at the beginning of the game. Okay, so after looking around the settings and menus some more, the game does in fact tell you how to do this, but it's only mentioned in the graphic for the controller layout. Why not in the tutorial prompt? How many people are honestly going to look at the controller settings over the prompt you force them to see at the start of the game? Especially if they're on PC, where the mouse and keyboard controls are intuitive, and there's really no reason to use a controller unless it's your preference. In the original, you would lock onto something holding LB and then hit triangle to levitate it. You could then double tap the triangle button to send it flying, but now in the remake, if you want to pick up things without throwing them, you tap the RB button, but if you hold the RB button, then it picks things up, and when you release, it'll throw it. It glows blue when you do a soft pickup, and it glows red when you pick things up to throw them. In the remake, you can now use telekinesis and your guns at the same time. These are the type of quality of life improvements that I like to see in remakes and remasters, building on and improving the mechanics of the original without throwing away or taking it too far that the original idea is lost in the process. Though with the remake, they removed the concentration meter, which was the mechanic that balanced the psychic abilities. It is fun that you can now indefinitely use telekinesis without running out of brain juice, but it does break the brain harvesting mechanic. Brain harvesting in the original was slow and used up most of your concentration, but now it's incredibly fast with only a few taps of the square button. And with the new lock-on, you can easily snap from enemy to enemy, requiring very little input and forethought. With the removal of concentration, this also removes the uniqueness of the G-Man enemies. The G-Men are genetically altered humans who, thanks to Majestic, have tapped into the Furon DNA within them, so they now have the ability to use psychic powers. In the original, they emitted green pulses that would drain your concentration meter to 0 instantly, making it so you could not use telekinesis, brain harvest, distractions, or disguises. Now in the remake, due to this change, they have nothing to do or bring to the table that is unique. They just became an enemy that gurgles at you and shoots blue pulse waves on the ground, but all it does is damage your shield slightly, which are functionally identical to grenades. The game doesn't have that much in the enemy variety department, so it's a shame to see one of the unique enemies completely invalidated. While telekinesis feels more fluid than ever in the remake, I sadly can't say the same about the other psychic abilities. My big issue with the other assortment of powers is their lack of feedback when using them. In the original, when you Cortex scan a human to read their mind, you can see the wisp flying from your head into theirs and back, showing the transfer of information. But now all it does is tether to a human's head and sits there until it finishes whatever it's doing. This lack of feedback feels like nothing is happening. I kept wondering if I was doing it right or was I missing something. The original also had a very distinct sound when accompanying the wisp.
Bring it on, bad guys. I'm going all Joe Friday.
The same issue can be also applied to the follow, distraction, and other input commands. They simply tether to your target and then you stand around waiting for something to happen, but with no confirmation that you are doing it right or that it's close to finishing. The only time I ever saw an indicator was when I was putting a follow command on Miss Rockwell, but even then I didn't notice it in actual gameplay and only saw it when rewatching footage during the editing process, so I had to go back and add this line to the video. In the original, with all of these abilities, you can see a trail of wisps flying from your brain into theirs, with a pulsating sound increasing as you get closer to completing it.
Invitation to the pool party at the motel.
And you had your concentration meter ticking down, so you can see it's actually doing something. I really don't get why they didn't do this in the remake, especially when brain harvesting has a modern reimagining of this. Sure, it still tethers the same as the others compared to the original's trail of wisps, but the massive difference here is the thumping sound that plays as you mash to make the human's head pop. I hope these will get changed in a patch because while not game breaking, it's still annoying and I would like to see it fixed. Okay, this is another thing that was only mentioned in the controller graphic, that you can tap the triangle button repeatedly to cortex scan faster. Again, why was this not mentioned in the tutorial prompt or given a sound/visual indication that this is happening, like when you transmog or brain harvest? Besides your guns and psychic abilities, your other tool to enact your plan of mass destruction is your flying saucer. Equipped with 3 guns, the Death Ray, the Sonic Boom, and the Quantum Deconstructor. The remake put a lot of work into updating the saucer, giving it a ton of new features, and has it on par with your regular arsenal when it comes to messing around in the sandbox. The Death Ray in the remake now scorches the earth, leaving a trail of fire that does damage to anyone passing through it. The Quantum Deconstructor has been reworked from a 2 ammo system to a percentage ammo count. Honestly, not a fan of this change and found myself never actually using it because I never had ammo. I'm also really not a fan of how the Sonic Boom looks either. It looks more like a light show on the ground than shooting a giant ball of pressure. In the original, the saucer honestly lacked defensive options, especially when up against the homing missile turrets. All you can do was swivel around and try to dodge the rockets, but now it's added the repulsatron, so you can deflect incoming projectiles. You could also sap energy from vehicles to heal your ship, and now transmog things in the world for ammo, instead of the terrible system from the original where Pox would send down repair units and ammo over destroyed buildings. It always felt like there was a disconnect there in the original, but now it feels great, and rarely did I ever run into any issues with the new take on the saucer's abilities. While your main objective is to cause as much mayhem as possible, sometimes it's more effective for a subtle approach, blending in with the masses to learn their ways and understand them to find the best way to destroy their society. This is done with the Hollow Bob, allowing you to take the guise of a human and walk around amongst them undetected. In the original, you simply hovered your reticle over a target, hit the circle button, and if you're within a very generous range, you will take their disguise. The Hollow Bob drains your concentration meter, so you will have to periodically scan people to keep up your disguise. In the remake, the Hollow Bob has been completely reworked, and while I haven't seen what others are saying about the game outside of sitting at an overwhelmingly positive on Steam, I feel like this will probably be the most contentious change of the remake. In the remake, you now have to be within a range that even after completing the game, I'm not really all that clear on. Sometimes you gotta be on top of them, and sometimes you can be on the roof of a building, but either way, you tether to them and you take their form. This time around, you actually have a solid character model instead of being a walking hologram that everybody seemingly ignores. You can also jump and interact with objects that you need to pick up instead of having to break your disguise to get whatever you need, like in the original. They removed fall damage in the remake too, and I'm so happy that they did this because Hollow Bob would be beyond frustrating if they still had the fall damage of the original, since you often need to be in an advantageous position in order to Hollow Bob without being seen or caught. Despite the removal of the concentration meter, you still have to cortex scan people to replenish your Hollow Bob. While this does add a few nice things, I think the Hollow Bob in the remake is 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. The time it takes to go into a Hollow Bob disguise feels random, with sometimes going incredibly fast and other times feeling like I'm in slow motion waiting to progress through the game. Your Hollow Bob can now be compromised by people seeing you turn into a human or seeing you exit for a second to use telekinesis, since you unfortunately can't use it without compromising the Hollow Bob like in the original. This is where the Forget Brain command comes in, returning NPCs to neutral alert, but it still has the same issue as I said with other brain commands. Even if you kill whoever saw you to cause the compromise of your Hollow Bob, it takes fucking forever to turn back to normal that it would be faster to just ditch it and get a new one from somebody who wasn't looking. I think where this implementation fails can be compared side by side with the Destroy All Humans 2 take on disguises. In that game, you body snatch instead of Hollow Bob, which functionally is pretty much the same shit as the remake, but where these two games differ is in 2 you have the Free Love command, stand, which everyone in the area dances, so you can get a clean body snatch and not be detected. Sure, there is distraction, but if someone sees you that's outside of the distraction range, they will just cause an alert, unlike free love, which hypnotizes everybody in the area. You could say that this mechanic made it not very interactive due to how get out of jail free card it can feel, but I would rather have this than something that frustrates me in the remake. Because of this lackluster stealth mechanic, we are introduced to restricted areas. These are zones that require a specific type of person to enter. At first I thought, okay, they're trying to spice up the gameplay a little, adding some stealth, but the more I played it, the more it reinforced my idea of, if you aren't going to fully dedicate your game to being a stealth game, don't bother putting in shallow mechanics like this, it just makes your game worse. The original did have levels with conditions like no police notoriety level or no army notoriety level, but the few times the remake uses restricted areas and keeping a low profile, it requires you to not be spotted instead of not having a certain notoriety level. And because of the inconsistency and issues I had with things like the hollow bob and other psychic abilities, I found these to not be that enjoyable. One of the other big highlights for the remake in my opinion is mobility. The series has never felt so fluid and fast paced. Not that there was anything particularly wrong with the original, but after playing the remake, I want a Destroy All Humans 2 remake with this. Crypto feels more nimble and faster. Overall movement feels far less stiff this time around, with the jetpack feeling like the best in the series. Crypto's descent from his jetpack and just falling off buildings is no longer slow and floaty, leaving you vulnerable in the air with nothing to do. The remake added a dash, which at first felt a little underwhelming, since I was hoping for it to have a more fast startup and send me farther faster, but then it introduced the skate feature, which I fell in love with. Anyone who is watching this video and planning to pick the game up, max out the skate upgrades as soon as possible so you can have infinite skate. This makes it so you can skate a distance, jump into the air, starting your jetpack, and then release the jetpack continuing to skate in midair. This just feels amazing as you run laps around humans, and it feels great to play on both controller and mouse and keyboard, which is surprising since most third-person shooters on mouse and keyboard feels slightly off in my opinion. This is helped by the remake actually having camera sensitivity options, instead of just being stuck with what you got. Thankfully, the original didn't also have inverted controls on top of not being able to change camera sensitivity. Now that we've gotten gameplay out of the way, let's talk about level structure and the progression in these games. You get missions on the map within the mothership, and you can select that location if you want to do said mission, or if you are further into the game, you can select one of the other locations and mess around in the sandbox. The remake actually allows you to access the sandbox of the location with a current mission, so if you want to, say, mess around in Santa Modesta for a bit before doing the next level. The remake also introduced the ability to replay missions without having to start a new save file. DNA is the game's currency for upgrades, which in the remake you can actually see all of them before even having the chance to purchase them. But also in the original, you would hit points in the game where you would be gated off from doing the next story mission without collecting X amount of DNA. You didn't even need to spend it to continue progressing, you just needed that amount on you. This was then removed from the remake, which cuts out the most pointless addition that gets in the way of allowing you to enjoy the game how you want to. It's never fun when a game tells you to go grind more instead of continuing the story you want to see. The remake also added mid-mission side objectives to give you extra stuff to do, along with end-of-mission rewards giving you DNA for completing the mission and extra stuff if you did the side objectives. This in turn helped cutting down on grinding for DNA for upgrades, making weapon progression feel a lot smoother than it did in the original. The remake also improved on the few bosses that are in the game. The bosses in the original weren't particularly bad, but ArmQuest's mech now feels like a unique fight instead of just another robot you've already fought a bunch of in Santa Modesta in Area 52, but now with a lot more health. The Robo Prez has a few new tricks this time around, but is still easily the worst fight of the three, due to having the same issue of having nothing to transmog in certain areas of the fight. And now they made Silhouette a Toho boss. I would go out on a limb and say that the original fights were held back by whatever limitations Pandemic had at the time with developing the game, since a bunch of their ideas ended up getting cut from this game and implemented in 2, which you can see in the behind the scenes stuff that's unlocked after you beat the game. So Black Forest Games did a really good job at pumping some new life into these fights. Besides the main story and the sandbox, the other things you have to do is challenge missions. There are 4 types. Rampage has you needing to kill X amount of specific types types of people, like the redneck farmers in Turnip Seed Farm, for example. In the remake, they needed you to kill enough people to fill a meter. Annihilation has you destroying X amount of buildings marked on your map. In the remake, it's changed that you have to cause a certain amount of property damage like in Saints Row 2 and 3. I honestly do not get what this challenge wants me to do, because I will destroy huge sections of this level and still not even come close to the first star. Races in the original had you running to specific checkpoints, and in the remake you need to follow a malfunctioning probe that is dropping DNA, and the longer you take between it dropping it and you picking it up, you receive less points. I much prefer the remaked version of this due to the improved mobility that I talked about earlier. The last one in the remake is Abduction, where you fling things into this giant moving circle, and in the original, some levels have you collecting brain stems or killing X amount of specific groups with another condition like only using the Zap-O-Matic, or in the case of a few locations, just having 2 challenges. I'm personally not that much of a fan of these. They're fun, but I often ignore them after doing them just once. One thing that the remake marketed before release was the return of a lost level that was cut from the original, and after playing it, all I thought was, it's okay. It's nothing more standout than anything else in the game. It's nice that they added it back, but if I didn't replay the original right before playing the remake or see constant news blurbs about it on the Steam page, then I would have never noticed the difference. I guess that's a good thing since it falls perfectly in line with the rest of the missions. The other thing added to the story in the remake is new voice lines. I was excited to see the seemingly new or leftover unused lines of Orthopox, but shortly into my playthrough, I realized it was not going to be a good thing. I must complain about this in all of my videos where I cover third-person games from the PlayStation 2 era that get revived in the modern generations. But because of these lines that have been added to this game, whether they be new or previously unused, Pox at times just does not shut up and makes jokes fall completely flat because I'm just being bombarded with Pox in my ear screaming every 2 fucking seconds. It is by far the worst in the challenge missions.
Hurry up! What are you, Russian slime?
Good!
We're under attack! Your time is half gone! Hustle, Prip!
The original is a PlayStation 2 game, and it had workarounds for multiple audio playing at once, which games today can't seem to figure out without cutting one off. The main story would always take priority, and Cortex scans would still appear on your screen but just as text. You weren't locked out of one or the other like some games do now. But in the remake, it has the same issue as things like Sly 4, where Pox talks over himself and Cortex scans still talk in the background while main story conversations are happening. And the mix can be really bad at times to where they interfere with each other. There also seems to be new lines for Cortex scanning. Again, I'm not really sure if these are newly recorded from Black Forest games or these were leftovers unused from the original project. Either way, these lines stick out like a sore thumb. Firstly, because their sound quality doesn't match the rest of the games, usually being noticeably worse. And second, they aren't that funny or they come off trying too hard. So either these were left out from the original for good reason in my opinion, or these are new lines from the new devs and they are a bad attempt at recapturing the original's magic. To round this video off, I want to close on talking about the remake's visuals. I love the art direction of this game. It's stylized and gorgeous, taking advantage of modern graphical advancements while keeping the charm of the original and not leaning too hard into tech demo land like other mascots have fallen into. The game honestly looks like what my nostalgic memories of the original are. It's just a joy to look at, and now you have multiple times of day in a bunch of the locations, though I don't really know how to select them when going into the sandbox. Some of the redesigns are a little weird and take some getting used to, like the cows. In the original, they looked like, regular cows, but in the remake, they look like rejected back at the barnyard designs. The only redesign that I'm not really that much of a fan of is, unfortunately, the mothership. I don't like how small it is now and how little of a presence it has on the main menu and loading screens. It used to have this dominating presence as it took up over a third of the screen, but now it's so tiny. Due to modern visuals being far more detailed than anything the PS2 could ever dream of producing, some things blend in with the environment at times, like the probe strobes or objective markers, since objective markers are now yellow instead of the pink that was in the original, which makes them blend in with the sunset. The same can be applied to objective markers for who to scan and who to implant commands into. They are so much smaller now, and they have the same color as health bars and everything else in the HUD. If they were to patch this game or make something else, I would like them to add some color back to the HUD, since everything is the same cyan color, and it just kind of blurs together with nothing really popping. Besides the visuals, the cinematography has been redone in some scenes. At times, it adds comedy with how it zooms and cuts between Pox and Crypto arguing, and other times I think it takes away from a few jokes, like this one.
What is that? A new silo?
Crypto! That human law enforcement officer is attempting an unauthorized entry of your spacecraft.
What is that? A new silo?
Electrocuted him with a big O!
Crypto! That human law enforcement officer is attempting an unauthorized entry of your spacecraft.
The remake does reposition the subtitles, which I found to be way too high in the original and ended up blocking Crypto's face, so I turned them off. So it's nice that they got that right this time around. One thing that both of these games do that I wish was an industry standard was behind the scenes content unlocked after you beat the game. The original had a commentary track, unused concept art, trailers from E3, which actually looked different from how the game ended up coming out. Tons of stuff that people like me who love seeing what goes into forming the games we end up getting. They show off a lot of content that for one reason or another had to be cut, like the original building destruction physics they couldn't get stable. The remake has a ton of concept art that in the corner shows the original stuff they were based on, so you can see their process of adapting from the originals. This really showed me and gave the feeling that they had a ton of love and respect for the original, that they didn't just throw it all away and make their own things. Going into making this video, I had feared that the original wouldn't hold up anymore, and by proxy, neither would the remake, due to my loss of love for the GTA open world destruction sim, and the fact that this was a 6th gen open world game. So outside of the main story and challenges, there isn't much to do in the sandbox besides just killing people, so once that gets dull, the game has really nothing to offer. And by today's standards, maybe this series would have been power crept by newer titles like Saints Row 3 and 4, which by comparison are way goofier and have more experimental weapons. I am happy to say that the original does hold up, and the remake is wonderful, perfectly priced at $30. While what I said was true about nothing to do in the sandbox, that was always an issue for the original. To describe this in the least reductive way possible, the first Destroy All Humans almost feels like a proof of concept game at times. They got the formula down, but outside of it, there really isn't much. This is why I think the second game is far superior, but it's really unreasonable to expect them to remake the second game first when the series has been dormant for a while and who knows if the remake would have even sold. I'm honestly torn. On one hand, I would love a remake of 2 because all of the improvements they added to the remake would make 2 even better, but on the other hand, I would be interested to see them take a crack at making a Destroy All Humans 5. They have proved that they understand the series from a gameplay perspective, so if they ironed out the iffy stuff from this game and build on it even more, they could make something truly amazing. The only thing is, I wonder if they could capture the magic of the original 2 with a new game from a writing perspective, since they went untested with remaking a game that was already fully written out and voiced. I have faith that they can do it, and I look forward to seeing what the studio does in the future, whatever it may be. Absolutely pick up the remake. It is well worth the price of admission. It was one of my most anticipated games of this year, and it lived up to my hype and expectations. Even if for whatever reason you don't like the remake, you could always pick up the original digitally on the PSN or Xbox Live store, so it's not like the original is lost to time, which is a great thing since classic games should be preserved for the future. If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks for watching as always. If you really liked the video, please pass it around. And if you really like the channel, maybe consider becoming a patron on Patreon. All patrons get access to the videos a day early, and I'm now going to shout out my $5 and up patrons who really help support the channel. Bully, Lucy the Fox, Comrade Fox, Tristan the White Wolf, Matthew Elliott, Dusty the Zombie, Filthy Finger 69, Clivermort, Vise, William Moore, Mr. Kill Jr., Tyler Schertzer, Some Panda, Poke Joke S, Joshua D. Larino, Chichomatrius, Ben Johnson, Sarah Chan, Oods of Nudes, Fish Kami, Joan Eisen, Alejandro Benitez, Star Fox, Flarbu, and Mitchell. Thanks so much, guys. Follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up to date on what's coming out next, and if you're a card game player of any kind, I have a TCG Player affiliate link in the description below. Any purchases you make using my link will give me a small kickback, so it's another way to easily support the channel. As for what's next, tune in on Sunday for the final episode of the Hitman retrospective with Hitman 2, and I hope to get it out on time, but my Halloween video will be on the Fatal Frame series. I have no idea when I'm actually going to end up doing it, but originally I had planned to do a Destroy All Humans 2 video right after this one. It would be similar to the Ratchet & Clank video, calling it a perfect sequel, because I really think that it improved everything from the original Destroy All Humans 1, but I kinda got burnt out on it, so I put it on the back burner for now, and will maybe come back either by the end of this year or middle of next year. Either way, I hope you enjoy whatever content comes next, and as always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.